Days ago, Anthropic released what it called the most capable model it had ever built. Right now, a Discord channel with 4,000 paying members is using it without permission, and Anthropic still has not been able to shut the door. Let me explain what just happened to the safest lab in artificial intelligence. Earlier this month, Anthropic announced the limited rollout of a model codenamed Mythos. Mythos was the preview release of Project Glasswing, an internal program the company had publicly described as too capable for general availability. The preview was wrapped in restrictions. A handful of vetted enterprise customers in pharma, finance, and federal research. Outputs filtered through a separate safety layer. A signed and monitored API endpoint. Strict rate limits. The whole rollout was the kind of cautious, scaffolded release Anthropic has spent years building its brand on. 9 days after Mythos went live to those customers, Fortune published the part nobody at Anthropic wanted printed. A Discord server, founded last year to trade Claude jailbreaks, has continuous, unauthorized access to Mythos. The membership had ballooned to roughly 4,200 users by the time the story broke. The server was charging a flat $200 a month. The access did not flow through any compromised Anthropic system. It flowed through a third-party fine-tuning vendor that one of the enterprise pilot customers had been routed through for compliance reasons. That is the part of this story that has every safety team in the industry on the phone with their lawyers. Because the breach is not a hack of Anthropic. It is a hack of the supply chain around Anthropic. And every lab is built on the same supply chain. Now let me back up. Why does this model matter? Why are people paying for a Discord seat to use it? Mythos is not a regular model release. According to leaked benchmark numbers that started circulating before the access did, Mythos hits 91% on SWE-Bench Pro. That is roughly 7 points above Claude Opus 4.7, which Anthropic released in February. It scores in the high 90s on the biology and chemistry knowledge tests Anthropic uses internally. It has roughly 2 million tokens of context, and in the safety evaluations the company published in its system card, Mythos reached the Tier 3 capability threshold the company had publicly committed to never deploying without unprecedented safeguards. The whole point of the Mythos preview was to test whether those safeguards held under real customer load. What the Discord access does is rip those safeguards off. The unauthorized clients are running Mythos through the vendor connection, without the output filters Anthropic layered on top. They are extracting capabilities at the raw model level. They are sharing benchmarks. They are sharing exploit chains. They are circulating screenshots that show the model writing code, planning attacks, and producing biology content that the production Anthropic API would have refused before generating a single token. Fortune's reporting also made one detail very explicit. This was not a one-time download. The members of the server have continuous access, meaning at the moment the story published, the door was still open. Anthropic had not been able to revoke, rotate, or contain the leak through the vendor channel. 9 days into the preview, with hundreds of millions of dollars of safety engineering behind it, the most capable model in the company's history was running for paying strangers on a Discord. So how did this happen? The pattern, as best as it can be reconstructed, is the kind of mistake that will eventually be taught in computer security textbooks. One of Anthropic's pilot enterprise customers, a regulated pharmaceutical firm, was contractually unable to send raw research data straight to a third-party model API. So Anthropic and the customer went through a compliance-approved fine-tuning vendor. The vendor was supposed to act as a privacy buffer, sitting between Anthropic's API and the customer's data, isolating sensitive prompts. The vendor's security review had been signed off months earlier as part of standard procurement. What Anthropic did not seem to fully account for is that the vendor was running multiple customer pipelines on the same infrastructure. A separate developer at the vendor, working on what looked like an unrelated tooling project, was eventually able to reach the Mythos endpoint through an internal proxy. From there, the access was offered, sold, and resold. Fortune named the vendor only obliquely. The lawsuits have not landed yet, but the people I trust on this story believe they will land within the week. The vendor is not a small player either. It is a Bay Area compliance startup that had become the default privacy intermediary for several pharma and life sciences customers using frontier AI. Anthropic was not its only frontier model partner. OpenAI and Google had pipeline relationships with the same vendor. That detail is going to matter a lot in the litigation that is coming, because every lab using that vendor is now a possible second leak. The reaction started arriving within hours of the Fortune piece. Dario Amodei issued a short written statement on X, saying the company was, quote, working aggressively with the vendor and federal partners to contain the access, end quote. Anthropic announced an emergency $5 million bug bounty aimed specifically at vendor-side security findings. the Federal Trade Commission opened a preliminary inquiry. 2 of the pilot customers paused their engagements pending review. Anthropic security engineers spent the weekend rotating credentials at every external pipeline they could identify. Whether that was enough to actually shut the leaking endpoint down is, as of this recording, still an open question that the company has not publicly answered. And inside the AI policy community, the responses were sharper. Researchers who had publicly criticized Anthropic for what they called safety theater pointed out that Anthropic's own threat model documented this exact category of failure 2 years ago. Other safety advocates went the other direction and argued that no other lab anywhere would have detected this leak in 9 days. Both arguments contain something true. Anthropic was the first lab to publicly catch the breach. It was also the lab that allowed the breach. Now let me sit with the bigger picture for a minute, because this story is bigger than Anthropic. 2 days before the Fortune piece dropped, Google announced an investment of up to $40 billion in Anthropic, anchoring the company at a $350 billion valuation. That was on top of Amazon's $25 billion add-on the week before. Anthropic's safety story is the entire reason those checks got written. The pitch to enterprise buyers, to regulators, to the federal government has always been the same. Anthropic is the lab where a model this capable gets released responsibly. The vendor leak punctures that pitch in a way that no normal product story would. It also lands in the middle of an active policy cycle. The White House's NSTM-4 memo, released just 2 days earlier, had warned about industrial-scale extraction of American AI by Chinese labs. The Mythos vendor leak is the domestic version of the same problem. The question is no longer whether frontier models can be exfiltrated. It is who is doing it, through which pipe, and how quickly the company can close the pipe before the model gets into the wrong hands. In this case, the answer was a Discord and a fine-tuning vendor in California, and the closing has not actually happened yet. The other lesson here is for every other frontier lab. OpenAI uses third-party vendors. Google uses third-party vendors. Meta uses third-party vendors. Every enterprise rollout of a frontier model touches a fine-tuning provider, a data residency provider, a compliance gateway, a cloud reseller. Each of those is a potential Mythos-style leak. Anthropic just demonstrated that a single mid-sized vendor can leak the company's most sensitive model to 4,000 strangers in 9 days. None of the other labs has a stronger supply chain, and most have weaker safety scaffolding around it. Even Sam Altman, who has spent the last year openly mocking Anthropic's slow rolled-out philosophy, kept his commentary unusually careful. The risk that this story is a preview of his own next breach is not subtle. So where does this leave us? Anthropic spent years arguing that the way to deploy frontier AI safely was tight scaffolding, vetted partners, and slow rollouts. The Mythos leak says the slow rollout was not slow enough, and the vetted partners were not vetted enough. The next 90 days are going to determine whether Anthropic's brand absorbs this, or whether the safety story that funded its rise quietly cracks. Either way, the rest of the industry is watching their own vendor lists with new eyes. This is the moment the safety lab realized it has the same supply chain problem as the chip industry. Stay sharp. Jane Sterling, Sterling Intelligence.